We've got some questions in Tactica for the new Mech Warrior. You've got that Warhammer. You've got all those weapons, lasers, PPCs, missiles. And then you suddenly realize it's not just the Warhammer. It's a lot of mechs in Battletech. You really can't fire all these weapons at once. At the very best, you're going to push that heat and take a bunch of penalties. At the very worst, once we get into the assault mechs like the Stalker, if you fire everything, you risk ammo explosions and shutdowns. So what's the point of having all these weapons if we can't fire them? And why would you design a mech that's not able to fire and utilize every weapon system properly? That's what we're going to explore within this framework. And part of it is the nuance of Battletech, but part of it is also possibility. Now, most light mechs, not all light mechs, mount a medium laser or primary weapon and some sort of secondary weapon like machine guns or short-range missile 2-packs, maybe a 4-pack. For the most part, you don't really have to worry about heat management. Once you jump to the medium mechs, depending on the configuration, you have to worry about and look at heat management. And then, of course, from heavies to assault mechs, we have to explore that fully. There are a couple of mechs within that framework, whether by design or luck, that can fire all weapons or all primary weapons and not have to worry about heat. The very nature of the machine allows you to disperse heat. But then we've got a whole band of mechs like the Marauder, the Warhammer, classic iconic mechs that just cannot fire everything every turn. Well, the first question, of course, is when are you really going to be firing everything every single turn? What you see with a lot of mechs, if we're looking at, say, the Stalker, and we're looking at the Warhammer, you have extreme range, long-range missile packs or PPCs that you're going to fire when the odds, when the dice, when the movement modifiers, when the hexes are in your favor to take that shot. As you get closer, what you're going to see with a lot of these mechs is you're going to start not firing PPCs and long-range missiles, autocannons, then switch to medium lasers, then switch to medium lasers and kind of really close-in stuff, short-range missile packs, machine guns, small lasers. Depending on the range bracket, you might not be firing everything. So the first thing to look at when evaluating mechs as a new mech commander or a new mech warrior, what are the primary range brackets of this machine? What is it looking to do at long range, medium, and close? Now, the second aspect, of course, is pacing. And this is where things get a little bit technical and you got to kind of crunch the numbers and look at the hexes. If I have a mech with 2 PPCs, and again, I'm looking at the Marauder, I'm looking at the Warhammer. I love these 2 machines, but they're kind of a great example of heat management or being aware of it. Depending on the other targets, the other possibilities, I can fire 2 PPCs, then 1, then 2, then 1. There's this idea of I might not be able to fire everything every turn at that range bracket, but I can put something out and I can push that heat a little bit. Push it, clear it. Push it, clear it. Now, this is if stuff is at long range or if we're trading shots back and forth. Maybe I'm on an elevation and you are, and we're going to go back and forth a little bit. The target that I'm shooting at reasonably, or the targets in the area or potential targets in the area, how fast can they close? How fast can they bring their other weapons to bear? What are those dangers? I don't want to be there with a Warhammer or Marauder trading those PPC shots, pushing that heat, and then all of a sudden something fast zips in, and now I have to engage with my close weapons, but I have a massive heat buildup. So we want to look and kind of take into account, sometimes you can push the heat, fire 2, fire 1, fire 2, fire 1, or fire 3, fire 2, pushing that out. Another example, of course, is pushing the heat in that moment and knowing when to do it. Side note, there are some mechs that are pure energy mechs. Energy mechs versus mixed arms mechs that have energy weapons but also ballistic weapons or missile weapons, where I have to not only worry about the modifiers at the lower levels, -1 to hit or -1 movement. I have shutdowns, yes, and then I got to see if I can restart. But as you push up that heat chart, things can start to cook off and explode. Energy mechs don't have to worry about that, but I still have to potentially worry about a shutdown or those movement modifiers. Understanding the difference between the two, you can push the heat a little bit more with a pure energy-based mech. Second, sidebar Tactica. There are rules for dumping ammo, jettisoning ammo. So there are some times where if you have a mixed mech of, say, a ballistics weapon, autocannon, missiles, and then the rest of your weapons are shorter range, medium range, energy-based weapons, or maybe you've got like a large laser. There are times when as the enemy is advancing, the lance is advancing, combined arms are advancing, and you're looking around where you realize, okay, I'm trading those shots right now. An example would be like if I'm playing a Phoenix Hawk. I'm shooting that large laser, but now as things start to close and I need to be more active and I need to be pushing the heat, you can dump that ammo out. You're not going to get it back. You can dump that ammo out and now essentially operate as a pure energy mech. You've cut down some of the potential weapon systems, but if I'm going to be surrounded and I want to be blasting my primary weapon and medium lasers consistently pushing that heat, there are some safe ways to explore that to remove the possibility of detonating with the heat. But keeping track of this heat and damage. Now, as an enemy machine takes damage, or maybe you've noticed this with yourself, you take a couple of hits, things go to internals, and now depending on the damage location, internal armor, there could be a weapon system in there. It could be an engine system. It could be ammunition. At that point, maybe you want to dump it. A critical system. There are times where you want to fire everything at once and push the heat, or you want to be able to blast, because if you say, look, I've got a mech that just threw a couple of, I guess, lucky shots for myself, my opponent not so lucky, good damage versus bad damage. We'll sidebar into that in a moment too for the next mech warriors, new mech commanders. Sometimes if I've managed to get a couple of good hits on you and I punch through to internals, this is a chance to really cripple you without having to bypass the rest of your armor. So I will push that heat. Just because you can fire weapons every turn doesn't mean you always are going to fire every single turn. You want to have a little bit of that play. Now, a sidebar, good damage versus bad damage. I've got a mech advancing. You take a bunch of hits. Good damage for me, of course, this is predicated on I'm doing my best not to get hit, which means movement modifiers up, terrain modifiers up, lanes of fire, firing arcs, all that stuff, doing the best I can. Easier said than done, not always possible. Sometimes the mission will put you in there where you've got to take some fire. Good damage is where the shots that come in, based on my mech, it's spread out. So maybe I get hit in the left arm, the right torso, the right leg, the center torso, the right torso. It's spread out. If I take 5 or 6 hits, it's spread out. That's, if I have to take damage, that's how I want to do it. Bad damage is, let's say I take 5 or 6 hits and you're rolling on that chart, left torso, right leg, left torso, left torso, left torso, right arm. I take those 3 hits. Another hit there, depending on the mech, could mean now you're into my internals. Now you're into my systems, let alone the damage transfer, depending on the location, having an arm or a leg just fall off. Technically, the rest of my mech is fine. I scratched off a few bubbles, but I took 3 or 4 hits to one location I punched through. That's a dangerous place to be because my mech can quickly sidebar into being crippled or destroyed when technically it's in pretty solid shape. At that point, if you're shooting at me, that's perhaps, depends on what else is going around, you want to be able to look and fire everything. So we have that framework of understanding the weapon systems. Another thing I want to touch on for the new mech warriors, or I should say star commanders, I've pushed this up to the Battletech playlist in more detail, the Alpha Strike in Battletech. Inner Sphere can do Alpha Strike. Some mechs do it better than others. Some clan mechs are designed for the Alpha Strike. The Alpha Strike is where, because you technically can fire everything, you don't have to necessarily be in range or be able to hit or manage that. You can fire anything that you want. Alpha Strike is where you roll up on the target and you fire everything in one massive salvo, which the idea is to literally cripple the target in that moment. Could be vehicles motive hits, could be a mech blasting a leg off, could just be putting on so much damage where now your opponent, the target, says, I have to retreat, I have to pull back. The Alpha Strike is where you do literally fire everything at once. But understanding heat management and understanding how that relays and plays in the game.